Welcome to the Crypto Podcast. You can find all our episodes on thecryptopodcast.org. My guest today, he's the co-founder of AdLunam Incorporated, and I previously interviewed his co-founder, Nadja Bester, and it was released on the 3rd of December last year, and it was episode number 61, so if you want to check that out as well. And my guest, he's a seasoned entrepreneur, mentor, investor, international speaker, and advisor in the Web3 space. He's spent years evaluating token-based investments, first as an analyst and a regular guest on the Crypto Now Show, and then later as an investor and token economics experts evaluating tokens, their teams, and closing over 200 institutional investments in the early stage Web3 companies for a portfolio company publicly listed in Canada and Germany. He's a startup mentor with the Stanford AI and Web3 Research Lab Association, Silicon Valley-based Founders Institute, and with the Department of Information Technology, Government of Goa, and advisor of, it looks like Reveal, but it's REV3AL.
Yeah, that's how it's pronounced, Reveal.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And Foho Coin, a member of the Cointelegraph Innovation Circle, and you're frequently quoted in industry outlets like Cointelegraph, Bitcoin.com, Investment.com, and others for his views on token, architecture, and Web3 investing. So please welcome, well, you're from India, and you told me a nice story about that, which we can touch on as well, but you're living in Thailand. Please welcome Jason Fernandes.
Hey, Roy. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is going to be a super exciting discussion, so I can't wait to get into it.
So let's just touch, because, I mean, I learned something new based on from where you're from and the kind of history of it. So you might just touch on that again to let the listeners know.
Sure. So I'm from a place called Goa, which is now in India, was previously part of Portugal, and not just like a colony of Portugal, the way India was a colony of Britain. It was literally part of Portugal. It was just a non-contiguous part of Portugal. And so pretty much everybody that was born there at that time were by default Portuguese. And so you have like a small little enclave of very interesting, culturally unique peoples in this place called Goa. It's a gorgeous little seaside town with a lot of beaches, and encourage everybody to go there. I spent like 10 years there after I came back from university, and it was really cool. But I think now I live in Thailand. Really happy to spend a lot of time here. Anyways, it's hard to describe living because you spend so little time at the place where you set up, right? Because you keep flying everywhere for events and stuff. But I spend a lot of time here, and I'm really liking it for sure.
Beautiful. So, I mean, we touched on it as well, but I'd like to share your crypto journey, how the whole lot started for you.
Cool, sure, yeah. So I was writing for a publication called Globasia Magazine, which is out of Indonesia. And I started writing a lot about Bitcoin. And I was also writing for a few other publications here and there. But I was writing a lot about Bitcoin. And so I think I started buying some. I had to buy at least a little bit just to know kind of, what it was, how it worked. At the time, crypto, like there was not an exchange in India. This was like 6 months before the first exchange started in India. So this is in would have been July 2013. At the time, Bitcoin was like $13. So yeah, I bought a little bit, kept sort of watching it. At the time, I had an IoT company. I was in hardware, but I was very, very, very much interested in crypto. And at some point, I pivoted to blockchain, and then very soon joined a company called AE Token. Worked with Gene Hoffman, who previously founded emusic.com. And then most recently was at IBC NFT Tech, where I sort of did a lot of investments in the Web3 space, and then also helped launch a lot of projects, sort of help them in the lead up to their public sale. Subsequently, I started AdLunam with Nadia and my other co-founder, Lawrence Hudson. Lawrence founded Travelocity back in the 90s in the US. So yeah, very, very, and then of course, Nadia is massively accomplished herself. And so yeah, it's been quite a ride since. Really exciting to be in this space, but particularly in the IDO space, you're really at the forefront of brand new projects launching. And so you see a lot of innovation. And I think that for me has been super exciting.
And I've seen that in India, the uptake in crypto or blockchain technology is massive now, and I think it's one of the biggest in the world. I know you've got the biggest population, but as far as startups as well, are they kind of leading the field in that as well, or is it just kind of users?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think India is not very, very friendly when it comes from regulatory perspective when it comes to crypto. I think maybe some of that might be changing, but like from the perspective of, I used to head an exchange in called the India operations of an exchange called X-Ray. And one of the things that was constantly, frustrating is because our on-ramps essentially kept going down. So you'd have an on-ramp where, that's how INR funds are ending up on the exchange. And sometimes that usually required a regulated intermediary that was obviously able to take part in a regulated manner in India. But then what would end up happening was, regardless of how many of these regulated entities you work with, they would constantly have issues where there'd be complaints, they would go down, they would go back up. And it was very, very, very difficult to have any sort of consistent, offer. I mean, I know Coinbase left India recently for the same reason, because they made a big announcement that they were going to have take what do they call it, IMPS payments, so that what's known as UPI, and I think everybody in the crypto industry was kind of like, wait, what? Because doing that would make things enormously complicated, and we realized that that's not going to last long. And sure enough, it didn't. So the next day they were like, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. And so what I would say is I find that for a lot of the people in crypto that start off in India, when they're to be successful, they're not in India anymore. So I think that's telling in terms of sort of how the government as a whole views crypto. Now that's changing a bit. I know a few exchanges have gotten certifications to run officially in India, but it's a place where I don't know if very many crypto field people really feel welcome. There've been any number of incidents where you really feel like your head's on the chopping block, and it's like, is it really even smart to stay around, right? So I think a lot of people feel that way.
And I'm not sure, are you based, I know you're located in Thailand, but is the company from Thailand, and how are they kind of embracing technology?
So I mean, again, the base, I spend a lot of time here, but I also spend a lot, I'm a Dubai resident. I'm also a digital resident of Palau. You've probably heard of that whole thing. It's a big, very, very interesting thing that country is doing. But yeah, and I'm also a resident of India, and so essentially I travel between these places whenever I need to, right? And then there's of course conferences around the world that we're often speaking at. A lot of that happen in Dubai, so we spend an awful lot of time there. But then also in India, I still have a house there and everything, so it's a lot of travel, back and forth. But I would say it feels like in Bangkok that the scene for crypto, at least on a community level, seems to be more happening, at least than Goa for sure, or where I was at, because again, Goa is not quite a tier 1 city, so you don't have a lot of people that are on the cutting edge of technology working around there. So that's sort of one of the things. But I think it becomes really difficult. Bangalore is such a hot scene, but you see, most of the top tech leaders, they move off to other places and they'll work remotely, because again, it's become for a lot of people in crypto, it's quite a stressful environment, I think.
So, you mentioned Coinbase, so what exchanges do you actually recommend? And just following up from that as well, because it's and I touch on it sometimes with some of the guests, but it's kind of, that, people are supposed to be kind of protected to crypto and nobody knows who it is. But then if I want to buy crypto in the morning, I can use debit, credit card, no matter what. But when I want to actually take it out, it's 10 times harder. and it's like you have to give your passport, utility bill, and all. So it's full traceability when you actually think about it. So it just, it takes the fun out of it, to be honest with you.
So I tell you, I mean, that's not something most crypto exchanges really want. What it comes down to is your off ramp, which could be Signum Bank in some cases, Signature Bank in other cases. These were really two of the bigger banks that would sort of serve crypto companies. Probably that is still true today. And so they had various rules. Like they'll meet with you, your compliance guy, and then they'll say, look, you have all these things to make sure. So if you're not doing KYC when people deposit, you have to do KYC when people deposit. Like you have to do X, Y, and Z in order for us to keep giving you that off ramp. Now, if you're in a crypto exchange, you need an off ramp. There's only so many off ramps available. So you basically are forced to follow these rules, and then those banks essentially get their rules from from government and wherever regulated bodies that they're regulated out of. So sometimes, even if they can't, crypto is enormously traceable. So because even if, for example, a crypto exchange refuses to give information, they could bully a bank that the crypto exchange is off ramping, and because that bank will be regulated in that country, right? So they can just bully the bank into giving them certain information. So it's really, really difficult to even maintain, for example, customer privacy. The one exchange that I would definitely recommend is the one that I was formerly at. That would be XRX. XRX was one of the few companies majority funded by the Taiwanese government. They recently, and this is last week, got an $18 million investment from Tether, which is a very sizable investment, but particularly for this company, but also, as in the broader scheme of things. That's not a small stake. It's practically a big piece. And so, so I definitely like XRX. One of the reasons is they have this product called proof of user balance, where you can actually go and look on the Merkle tree and make sure that your balance is actually sitting there. So there's not a lot of accountability with exchanges normally, where exchanges have been known to send funds here, send funds there, stake it. But here you can actually make sure that your funds are on the exchange. And I think that's super important if you're dealing with a centralized exchange. So that's one thing I like about them. Another exchange that I like in Europe, this would be in Asia. If I was working in Asia, that would be the place I would look at. Another exchange, so they're very active in Singapore. XRX in Singapore just has some just picked up some new money licenses. But in Europe, I use CoinMetro. I like CoinMetro a lot. CoinMetro is founded by Kevin Marco, who is me and him used to have a podcast together called Crypto Connoisseur a long time ago. But he's a great guy, really, really smart. Oh, we used to actually be on a show called Crypto Now on BlockSive TV, which is like a 24-hour blockchain channel back in 2019. Like they're now defunct. But yeah, so he runs CoinMetro, does an amazing job of it because the fees are great. I found the lowest fees pretty much when it comes to trading and also when it comes to withdrawal. Withdrawals are instant. And so yeah, CoinMetro, XRX, those would be the two exchanges that I think the only ones that I would feel comfortable about telling people to use.
Excellent. And do you ever feel that it will get away from the fiat currency? Because basically, like you see the likes of Vanguard, BlackRock, and all these companies getting involved in this. And if you look at, like, say, George Soros and everything, I mean, they kind of nearly crippled the sterling at one stage just with manipulation of the markets. And the problem is when they've got the printing press, no matter what you're doing, they can actually get whatever they want and they can manipulate the market. And I would personally love to see a situation where that it's away from that. Can you ever see that happening?
Yeah, well, I don't see that happening altogether, right? So I don't think that crypto is a replacement for fiat. I think that you're gonna see a lot of transactions happen, via crypto, but I don't think it's ever gonna, replace fiat. Mostly because, fiat by definition has value because the country says it has value. It has certain, it has a full. For example, the U.S. dollar has like the full faith of the U.S. government, right? Like that's what backs it essentially. But what's going to end up happening, I think, is that people are going to have the option because it's going to be so easy. It's going to be the same financial rails that send crypto as that send fiat. So you're going to end up like Stripe is a perfect example, like where you can actually send funds via crypto and things like that. I think they've recently allowed you to do that, which I think is which is really interesting. And then also I think they allowed you to buy crypto via credit card. And so once you have the same financial rails for both crypto and the traditional financial markets, what you're going to have as an option is the option to choose to whether you want to send remittances, for example, in US dollars, in Bitcoin, in let's say USDT, and obviously there'd be associated fees with that. And sending it via fiat will always be more expensive than sending it via, let's say, USDT or XRP, for example, right? And so once these currencies are on a level playing field, I think people are going to increasingly start picking the latter, because governments for a long time have showed that they're really not very trustworthy in terms of what they if you trust them to handle the whole money and financial system, like they're not super trustworthy. Like in Greece, they had to go in and like take money right out of people's bank accounts, right? So I think the government for a long time has had a monopoly on controlling the money supply. And sometimes they may have not done they may not have done the best job, but there's really not been any options. But I think now you're going to start seeing options, and so people are going to be like, hey, do I want to trust my hard-earned value in US dollars when we can print unlimited amount of them, or do I want to have it as, let's say, Bitcoin, which is finite, or do I want to have it as USDT? Either of these are possibilities, right? But I guess the question is, how do you store value and ensure it still has value over time? So I think that the answer to that is probably not fiat.
Excellent. You gave great examples for the exchanges. So I'm just curious with the wallets, what wallet do you recommend?
Yeah, so I mean, I just use MetaMask really when it comes to decentralized wallets, and then I have, of course, centralized wallets at the exchanges that I use. But those are kind of hot wallets, and then you have the cold wallets where you really don't use access those funds, and so. But yeah, I mean, MetaMask is sort of default. It's the thing that's like most compatible with a lot of services. In fact, the AdLunam Launchpad, you previously only allowed MetaMask. We're now building in Wallet Connect, so you can connect sort of multiple wallets to AdLunam's platform. So we're working on that right now. Matter of fact, we're sort of building that out. But yeah, that's what I would say in terms of wallets.
Like with I remember like the MetaMask, the reviews on that, because I know a lot of people use it, but there's a lot of people have been kind of like hacked and everything. It's some like 15% that was negativity, which is a shame that happens. Like the fear is when you're kind of connecting to a wallet on an exchange that you don't know, that you make an assumption. How do you know that that's not scammers that are actually after creating something and you're just after giving them your wallet details?
Yeah, you don't. You definitely have to check. So do your own research goes 10 times for this industry for sure, right? But the fact is that even like very so-called regular brands, have been known to scam people. I mean, Nadia and I exposed a huge situation with Rarible, where essentially like we had won some Web3 domains and they fraudulently essentially gave it to somebody else, manipulated the timings and various different things. We have some information coming out about that. Binance covered it, Cryptopolitan covered it. So yeah, I mean, there's information out there that has not been, for example, disputed by guys like Rarible, Unstoppable, for actual things that should be scams, right? So when you have like brands like that caring so little about their reputation as to not really give out decent explanations, I think it's very difficult to like hold smaller, services here and there to account that are not billion-dollar companies and not multi-million-dollar companies. And then of course you have the straight scams, right? So like where's like one website that's masquerading as another website, and you connect your wallet and then your wallet is drained. So I think crypto has a while to go before it's easy to use. And I think like Jack, the Twitter guy, like he had said at one point that he was going to be looking into like Square and using sort of trying to fix crypto payments to where they were easier and cheaper. But that's not quite happened. It's still really complicated. Like nobody really knows how to be fully safe when they're using crypto, particularly with decentralized wallets and stuff like that. And then when you have centralized wallets, then that's not your money. You're not the keys, not your crypto, right? So it's like either ways, you're kind of in a danger, right? In a danger zone. I know a guy who's a very close friend of mine who's been in the crypto industry for years, who had exactly this happen to him, where basically all his funds were drained out of his wallet. So he had tokens of a company that he'd been working for several years. He lost all those tokens, and there was really no way to recover them. They traced them to Binance, but there was no way to like actually recover those tokens. So you can just imagine how heartbroken somebody like that would be. But like, yeah, I think that crypto is a way to go before it's friendlier and easier to use, to where anybody can feel
like
safe.
there's so many people that are being scammed. I mean, a few people on the show. There's a friend of mine, he had $500,000 he'd taken, and another guy that was on the show over 100,000. And like, if you go, like, so if that went to Binance and they know your customer, and the same with like the websites and everything that they use, they have the fraudulent websites, like there's usually kind of traceability for the website. Yeah. I'm sure you can catch them. It's just that, like, recently, I had somebody that was supposed to do marketing, and they were fraudulent. They got paid, but it was like, I done research. I saw the followers and everything, and done the call, the whole lot. Like, and I usually spot things straight away, and I got caught. And I even went on to the police, like, and the crap that I got back was like, oh, you need somebody in the country that's it was like, it's not our problem, basically. Like, and I was like, so in reality, if that was taking money from the taxpayer, like, the government wanted it, they'd have it sorted in a minute. But because it's you, oh yeah, that's not our problem. And like, I don't know, is there a way of getting an organization that even if they take 10%, because I think if somebody loses everything, they'd be very happy to give 10%, but there has to be ways of catching them, like, because there's always levels that they make mistakes at.
Yeah, I mean, there's a company called CipherTrace who we used to work with at XRX, possibly still work with them. Essentially, it allows you to sort of trace, ensure that the funds that are being deposited into your account don't come from sources like terrorists, the
American government.
Yeah, exactly. Iran, countries like that. So essentially, like, it is immensely traceable. So I remember that, like, their leadership did a little webinar where they kind of explained to us how the technology works and stuff. And then, like, they are able to tell you, hey, look, this wallet is an ISIS wallet, and this wallet is a terrorist wallet, and so on. And then they start, you see where the money goes. And ultimately, all these funds end up on, generally, if you're going to do something on any scale, they're going to end up on a regulated crypto exchange in some country that the guy is probably already KYC'd on, right? So sometimes it'll go like 2 or 3 steps. But if you see multiple, for example, transactions going from, let's say, this wallet to that, and then this wallet is, essentially what looks like cashing out those funds over time. So let's say laundering those funds. Well, you can very easily tell that, like, if you're looking at where the money goes. So it's like, follow the money is super true in this case. And that, there are companies like Hacken, who AdLunam is partnered with. That's a fantastic company. They make sure that your smart contracts are impregnable. Nobody's gonna hack them. Hack them. They mess with them have. There's no major vulnerabilities. And then there's companies like Match Systems, who we also worked with before. Match Systems is fantastic security guys. They have actually traced, I think, like a vast number of cases that were over a certain amount. They basically had most of them. So they are able to, like, sort of do asset recovery, then trace them and stuff like that. So it's a very manual process. These are private companies. So Match Systems is a private company, for example, that you could contact. But they do these investigations. So, I mean, Match Systems did an investigation for the situation that happened with us and put out a report. We're really, really glad for them to do it. Very, very grateful, because they are very, very dedicated. Both them and Hacken are very, very dedicated to ensuring that we keep crypto clean. and like the regular average Joe doesn't get, doesn't lose out, right? That's the problem. That's what you want to stop.
Right. Which like the NFTs then, because like you mentioned wearable. There's a lot of different platforms out there, and that's a kind of wild west as well. It's very hard to kind of know which ones to use and which ones you can trust. Like what's your kind of recommendations there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Magic Eden is probably one of the better NFT platforms. I think the problem is these things are so much in flux that it's very, very difficult. I don't know the name of the exchange offhand right now, but there was a very large exchange that we were partnered with. We went back to look at kind of what they're doing. They're really well known. I'm talking like maybe the top 20, top 50 exchange. So have been around for like many, many years. Turns out they haven't posted on their Twitter for like several months. They basically disappeared. They ghosted people. So it's like it's amazing that there's so much flux on these platforms. Like an exchange that seems very, very trustworthy today, FTX, for example, is not trustworthy tomorrow, right? So I'm hesitant to like endorse like the NFT platform, other than to say CryptoRank. If you go to CryptoRank and you look at sort of where the most popular NFTs are, those platforms would generally be, again, you find Rarible on that list, and I don't think Rarible is particularly trustworthy either. So, whatever that's worth. So I guess, you do have to be careful. The most dangerous area I think right now is meme coins. You have like the craziest things happening with these meme coins, particularly Solana meme coins. So you have people that like are setting themselves on fire to increase like the price of their meme coin. People are like taking off their clothes to increase, like live streaming themselves doing things. It's just madness, right? Like guys live streaming themselves, like speeding through places. And this is sort of to like increase the value of a meme coin. But a meme coin by definition has no utility, right? And then you have guys like that are really crypto stalwarts. So I won't name them offhand, but there's a couple really well-known crypto influencers, and you hear them talk about meme coins. And I distinctly heard literally both of them saying that the criteria that you use to decide whether or not you'll invest in a meme coin is whether you find the meme funny. Like, how is that an investment? How is that remotely a way to make a buy? Like, I know somebody who messaged me the other day saying, hey, he's thinking of launching a coin on pump.fun. And I'm just I mean, this is I hope this whole thing disappears quickly, because what's going to end up happening is so many people are going to lose money on here that what's the point of being a crypto project that's like trying to build actual utility, trying to set up partnerships, like doing all this whole thing when other guys are setting up meme coins, admitting that they're a total scam, and then making more money than the legit companies that are trying to build an actual business. Like, it's complete madness, right? And so anybody who loses money here is not going to then turn around and put it into something that's, legit, because it's not as much of a, what's the word? It's not as much of a lottery kind of, like with meme coins. So sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. But when you have a legit company that's building something, well, it's going to grow probably on a very, not quite linear, maybe exponential, but not quite at like a meme coin, and so they're not interested in putting money there. And if they lose money, they're even less likely to put it there. So you have like an entire generation of people that are coming into crypto that will probably never try this again.
So with the coin then, the FOHO coin, what exactly, tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a while ago. I don't have very much to do with the company anymore. Essentially, what they were is like a real estate company. So I think they're very early on in the whole what's known as RWAs today, real world assets type thing. One of the problems is RWAs are almost always, because they represent a real world asset, they're almost always a security. right? Because let's say you're talking about, real estate, you're talking about gold so let's say silver. This is a real world asset. So by definition, if you're allowing a person to invest in it, you're clearly allowing an investment in a security, right? Which brings a whole bunch of set of other regulatory issues. So for example, in the US, before you can can release a security, you have to basically, well, first of all, they use a Howey test to determine whether something is a utility or a security. RWAs are almost always going to be securities as far as the US are concerned. I think there's some places like in Switzerland that view it differently, but companies aren't regulated by the place that they're from. Well, in this case, investors aren't really regulated by the place that they're out of. They're regulated by who the investors are, where those guys are from. So you have enough people from the US somehow end up over there, and now that is de facto being regulated or could be brought up by the SEC as basically offering an underwritten security. Foho was interesting because what it did was, while it was a real estate company where they were essentially selling these NFTs that were backed by real estate, they had a utility token called Foho Coin. And essentially the utility of that token was that you could buy the NFT, but in order to buy the NFT, you still had to, the NFT itself was a security, right? So this NFT represented like a property, and then you could fractionalize that property. But that NFT was a security. And so you could use the utility token to buy the security token, provided you met the criteria that you would need for that particular country to invest in the security. So what that did is, from a tokenomics perspective, it decouples the price of the NFT from the price of the fungible token, because the fungible token can sort of increase and decrease and can have a certain degree of speculation, whereas the NFT is very, very firmly tied to that real world asset. So that's kind of the concept of Foho. Although what they did was eventually they started to accept US dollars to purchase these NFTs. And essentially what that did is it sort of collapsed value from their native token, because if I can buy, spend US dollars, it's probably much more convenient for me to just do that than to buy Foho coin and then use it to, buy these NFTs. So yeah, that was that though.
And like you're kind of with different startups that you get involved. Like, so, I assume there's a common denominator of errors that people make. So what do you see that's kind of like most of them make this mistake?
Sure. So I'll tell you, I think the most, early projects, I think, a lot of companies, particularly with tech focused founders, they believe that, if they put out a project, if they put out a product, let's say it's you just invented a cure for cancer. It doesn't matter. You're not going to have VCs banging down your door to put in money. That's what these technical founders assume. That it's a technical problem, and then once they fix the technical problem, the money will just flow in. In crypto specifically, it's a very, very, very much a clicky industry. So you'll have various different cliques of investors, and it doesn't matter sort of where. It doesn't matter if you have the funds; it's where those funds came from, right? So every project that's launching for a public sale will have a very limited number of tokens that they can sell pre-public, right? And for now, you could, let's say, come into a lot of money and fund your own company. That doesn't constitute validation for an institutional investor looking at a possible investment, right? And so a lot of investors, when they're making that decision, it's like collective due diligence. So they want to see kind of who are the other investors that are already on your cap table, right? And if they've worked with them before, they have relationships there, they'll feel much more comfortable about investing, because they understand, for example. So for example, when I was at NFT Tech, I had a lot of respect for Gaines Associates. They make investments. And so I know, for example, that their tokenomics expert is on point. And so they've made an investment in a project, probably a good bet that they'll be doing that they've done their whole work and they've actually studied this. And so, of course, when you have that validation times 4 or 5 other investors, that's when you sort of make that decision. So a lot of companies tend to feel like they've invented something that's mind-blowing, Investors are just gonna jump in, and one investor is gonna believe it. Then he's gonna back them, and then other investors are gonna come up. It doesn't really work that way. The way it actually works is that investors that like a project will share it before making an investment with 2 or 3 other people that they trust that are also investors, and essentially they come to a consensus on what they want to do. And then the guy who shared the project will generally invest last, once all those guys are already invested around the same time. He'll invest only if he knows that he will be the lead investor. There's no other investors. But if he's got, let's say, a card of 5 or 6 investors that are all interested, he realizes that each of these guys have different levers that they can pull to make that project successful. So, for example, they might know this investor has a very good relationship with Bybit, or this investor has a really good relationship with Coinbase. So I don't even need to know, where they're listing. If XYZ are on board, I already know based off of the levels that they have access to where they will likely end up, and that they won't be a completely complete failure because they at least have these options based on the people that have invested in it. So I think to sum it up, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people do is that they spend a lot of money developing the product as opposed to developing relationships around people that can sort of help them take that to the next level. And also they tend to feel they tend to not quite value the importance of early investors. And so that's why you'll find a huge group of projects with no investment, and then another group of projects where everybody's just throwing money at them. And so the difference between that is the relationship that that project has versus the relationship that this project has.
And when somebody's got kind of their own unique system and the investors are throwing in the money, what protection can the investor use that when it gets to a certain level that your man doesn't disappear with all the money because it goes into the blockchain and he has access to it?
No, listen, this is massively a concern, and there's no real good answer to this, because I have myself invested in projects where I've subsequently come to believe that the founders were not well-intentioned at their intention. Because one, let's call it the Adam Newman strategy. One strategy that unscrupulous founders use is they'll say, okay, this is the company that I'm using right now. What I'm going to do is I've raised a significant amount of money, or run it into the ground, use that money to build my own personal brand, and then my next company will be successful. That's the Adam Newman strategy, right? That's what he's done. It's a really massively disingenuous way, obviously, of getting ahead. But there are some founders that are actually doing that, right? And so I've seen companies where the founder, he's got a new project, and it's a new project every few months. And it's okay, well, how did the other project go? And what about the guys that put in money with that on that project? Where are they at now? You see me very into this new project. Where is the passion for that previous project that we heard of 6 months ago? What's going on with that, right? So I think that when you're funding a founder, when you're funding a company, you're really just funding the founder, and you have to have a lot of trust in that particular person to see the product through to the end. And so that's why that goes back to my previous point about the clicks, right? That's why it's such a click situation, because if I'm an investor, I want to invest in a known quantity, a guy who has been around for a significant amount of time, has built this relationship, has ideally had an option to exit before and has chosen not to take it, right? So if you look at a guy who's in crypto, let's say 5 years, let's say he's founded 3-4 companies, he's definitely had the option, if he was going to take the money and run, to do it. And he hasn't. So now you're massively increasing your chances that he won't do it in the future. This is a guy who respects, his own reputation and has built it over years, so he's not going to just throw it away. Now, in contrast, you see somebody else who's I've seen projects with no LinkedIn, no social media at all. You look at the founders, they're not docs. If I don't know who the founders are, how am I going to give any money to anybody? I'm not giving money to somebody named Crypto 8, or something like that. Like, that's ridiculous, right? Like, I have to give it to a person, and that person has to be trustworthy. So, this whole thing of undoxed founders, I think like if you're putting money there, like you're just asking for trouble. I'm sure that there's some that are very, very legit. I'm sure, but that's not that's not a risk that I would take. So,
and I'm curious how, like, with especially inheritance at this stage now, because nobody knows what's around the corner. Something could happen to us, and I get a brick fall off a roof or something land on our head. Like, protecting that it goes to your loved ones, that your assets go to it, it seems to be like a very risky, and then getting different answers for that. And I'd love to know your take on that, how you can actually make sure that your wallet with all your assets gets passed on in such a way that you're not going to be ripped off before you actually, kick the bucket.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I have no use for money once I'm gone, anyways, right? So
I know, but like, for example, for me, like, I'd want my children to have it, and it's like, because sometimes people, like, they're trusting their solicitor. I mean, I've seen solicitors selling houses a few times, and there's a lot of fraudulent solicitors, a lot of fraudulent accountants and everything. So it's like, it's a hard one to navigate, to protect you, but also to ensure that it gets passed on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are certain I think there are even services that you can sign up for where they ensure that, like, if somebody passes on, their keys are given to the next of kin and so on. I know that this happened at X-Rex. When I was at X-Rex, one of my close friends who had signed up, unfortunately, he passed away, and so there was an actual procedure in terms of his daughter would have to provide his death certificate and so on, and then she would be able to get control of his wallet and so on. But I mean, I think when it comes to it's a sticky situation, because anytime you write any information down, you're also risking that somebody else could have the access to that information. But I think people are using cold wallets. And people are putting, their keys on paper and then putting it in safe deposit boxes. I think, given the fact that our system is the way it is now, I think that might be the way for people with a lot of crypto that are more traditional to maybe just store their things in their safe deposit, like their keys in their safe deposit box along with their gold or whatever. And that's probably the most likely that ensures that their descendants get access to those funds, because they're going to get access to that gold and so on. So if the keys are there, presumably they'll know what to do with it. But I mean, for me, it was really funny. Somebody was like once asked me about like whether like I was going to sign up for insurance, and when I figured out that basically they pay everybody else after you're dead, I was like, yeah, no, like no way I'm paying you now, so that after I'm gone, somebody else is going to get paid. Like, no, thanks. I'm cool. You know what I mean? So I mean, if something would happen to me, like I have I really don't care what happens to them, to my money, basically.
And I suppose, like, just to touch on your own company, what exactly you're doing, so people know exactly, what you're helping people.
Yeah. So AdLunam is essentially a Launchpad Accelerator incubator. So what we do is we will help projects in the lead up to their IDO or IEO. So that means getting them, like we call it zero to IDO. We have a zero to IDO accelerator, and essentially gives them everything that they need to get from like you're really starting having a product, but then trying to figure out, either tokenomics, how to construct a token around it, how to bring the right advisors, investors, institutions on board. So we have an advisor network where we have some in-panel advisors that we connect with projects. I have an institutional investor network. I think we have 43, 44 institutional investors that we can introduce projects to. Then we also have partnerships with 5 out of the top 15 exchanges by ROI. And so we can also get them listed if we get to that point, also get them investment. And we're in the process of setting up, various different sections of AdLunam. So for example, we have AdLunam a newsletter, which allows them to create newsletters, very similar to, like a newsletter delivery service. We also have a Gen AI service that our IDO projects can have access to. We recently launched an automated service that's happening this week. So it allows them to sort of connect various different social media and automate it. So if they're creating an IDO plan, they can have it basically automated to the largest part. So basically getting them like all the tools that they need to be able to build their, what we call a zero to IDO suite, to build their IDO literally from scratch with as little intervention as possible. So that's one thing. We're also working on some interesting new products. We already have the Engage to Earn platform, which is ready. We have our Launchpad, which is also ready. We're sort of waiting on the market to pick up before we launch that token. So we've been internally testing it and things like that. And we partner with a lot of projects that are, either layer one chains and investors. So that's basically to provide those to projects that we're launching. And then again, we of course look at projects themselves that we can probably accelerate to that. So basically finding a project, selecting it, connecting it with investors, advisors, institutional investors, market makers, exchanges, and basically Launchpads, for example. So we sometimes co-launch other Launchpads. Basically everything that they need in the lead up to their public sale, make sure that it's incredibly successful. Because I think that early success massively sets the tone for how these projects, do on the longer term. So if you do like a 20x, you might sort of at launch, you might sort of contract down to 15 or 10 during a bear market. But, once you do like, let's say 5x or 2x, so, if you barely cross your ideal valuation, it becomes really, really, really difficult to build the inertia to move that price upward to any significant level. And so then, and of course, once that happens, then if your token is worthless, then you're unable to really do anything. So I think that's sort of where AdLunam sort of comes in to sort of ensure that they have the most successful launch by using our network. Because you might be really good at building whatever specific product that you're building. You might be a genius at that, but that doesn't mean you'll also be able to, you're also a genius at launching products. I mean, launching IDOs, launching IEOs. Like, it's its own art to be able to like launch an IEO. There's very specific levers that you need to pull that regardless of whether you have a really great product, you have to go through these steps. And these steps, you need somebody who's got the perspective of having launched multiple projects in the past and been on various different sides of that, right? To sort of give you an idea. Because all these guys, it's their first project, so they think that they know everything and that they know what they're doing. But it's like we've seen multiple life cycles of projects, and we've seen them come and we've seen them go, and we've seen why they've come and we've seen why they go. So
reality kicks them into the head. It's like they're optimistic as they're they think people will run to them, but that's not the way the world works.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we've spoken to a lot of projects. So I spoke to one project recently. That, I was trying to explain to them the importance of institutional investment, why they needed to go to institutional investors. And she's like, well, the founder was like, well, we've spoken to a lot of retail investors, and we think that there's enough retail investment to buy out our round. And I said, okay, great. What about once that hits the exchange, and then you have the next set, the secondary set of buyers? How do you ensure that, there's those guys, okay, maybe you've convinced these set of retail investors, but how do you make sure that the next set, wants to hold your token for more than the minimal amount of time? So there are very specific ways you launch a token. Mostly that involves, targeting the institutional investors first, because that sets the tone, and then, sort of retail investors get it from there. The reason you can't directly go to retail investors is because the retail investors are different at all different times. So what you need is for them to all be getting the information from, multiple institutional investors that they trust, as opposed to you directly trying to sell to each retail investor, which is literally impossible, right? So there's a very specific way that you promote projects, and if you try to do it differently, reinvent the wheel because you think you're special, it's not going to happen. These investors aren't going to change their entire, way of investing, the entire way they do due diligence just because you decide to launch your project in a non-standard way. You know what I mean? So this is sort of one of the things that we encounter a lot of, where we sort of have to try to tell them to be more traditional.
Excellent. And just finally, Jason, like with the social media and kind of promote yourself, I see you've got a very impressive 1 million followers on X or Twitter or whatever, but just to kind of how did you grow it so big? Because that's massive. There's very few can actually do that. But what other kind of social medias do you think serves you well?
Yeah, so I mean, we have as AdLunam, essentially we build other projects, and that includes oftentimes building their social media. The best way of doing that is to like hold contests, giveaways. We do these things where you have to do, let's say, multiple different. It's almost like quests where you have to, let's say, follow a company. You follow this, you retweet that, and once you've done all these things, then you get you're officially an entrant, right? So we've done that a few times to grow both our own social media following, and then of course, like a lot of times the company will experiment with my accounts, mostly because like why better than experimenting with the official company account anyways, right? So a lot of times it's grown using contests, just like putting out crypto content. Basically, when the you have to, a lot of the crypto sort of KOLs, there's a significant amount of freebies that have to go out just to maintain that, which is surprising. It's not something that I anticipated like earlier on. So you basically have to like regularly be communicating with these with people that follow you, and like for example, Evan Luthra is brilliant at this. He's built a huge following, and his followers are very diligent about promoting the projects that he's involved in. So I mean, it's its own science. It's a lot of work, honestly. So I don't really spend very much time on it. But I think from AdLunam's perspective, we certainly seen the importance of building people's social media following, because of course a lot of investors, other institutional investors, like they won't even look at you if you don't have more than a certain minimum amount of followers. And the same thing, or engagement for that matter, right? So if you might have a bunch of followers but no engagement. And one of the things that we're facing these days on Twitter, for example, is people are getting shadow banned. So like the contest not coming up. So try as you may, you just can't grow that Twitter following. Like it just won't grow. It'll be like exactly the same amount no matter what you do. And this is happening across a lot of social media, where a lot of crypto people are complaining that their content is being singled out for step-motherly treatment.
But yeah, no, excellent. Listen, Jason, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. You might let people know how they can find you.
Oh, sure. I mean, people can connect with me at with Jason.x is my Twitter handle. Jason Fernandes is my Instagram handle. And then obviously I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's also the Jason Fernandes. But regardless, they can just search for me. Happy to chat with anybody who is sort of like looking at figuring out how to like take that project from early stages to the point where they can, have a very, very successful public sale. So happy to help chat with anybody. It's been great chatting with you. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
No problem. I make sure I put the links both on the audio and the video.
Can't wait. Awesome. Keep going. Have a great day.
Yeah, no problem. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, and comment on everything that we discuss, because as long as it's not abusive, it stays up. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends, because it really helps. Until next week, take care.